Hi there everyone, my name's Danny Till and this is my YouTube channel. I mainly work in watercolors and today's tutorial will be of a wisteria. I'll be using my mungyo pan set. The colors are yellow, indigo, purple, a permanent violet and a cold pink. And in addition to that, I'll also be using some greens, and these are also from the mungyo set. And there's a malachite green, a Van Dyke brown, a viridian, an olive brown, and the yellow. Now with the yellow, I'm just showing you, by adding just a little bit of yellow to the existing colors, we can change the warmth and coolness of the color. So by adding the yellow to the Van Dyke brown and dragging that out with a little bit of water, you can see that you can just change that tone, and that will help when we come to the leaves that we're working on this particular tutorial of the wisteria. And again, just adding the yellow to any of these colors, it just gives a different dimension and it will help with textures within the leaf itself. Now for those of you who want to freehand the wisteria petals, basically there's a bottom half which I'll be using the purple and the indigo for the darker halves. The center will be yellow, and then this top section which arches up and around, I'll be using mainly the permanent violet and washing that out to get the finish that I'm after. Now the brush of choice this time around is the Silver Black Velvet number 6 brush. I like it because it takes on water, but it also has a lovely point, some paper towel, clean water, a pencil to sketch out your wisteria, just any pencil will do that you favour, and an eraser if so needed. Now once you have the sketch drawn out, we're going to work from top to bottom on this particular painting. So starting from the top, I'm going to pick up some permanent violet straight out of the palette, and with my number 6 brush, I'm going to apply it very gently and softly around the most fleshy bit of that petal, so the upper bit of the petal. And what I'm going to do here for the entire painting is just work with the permanent violet and make my way all the way down this wisteria. So ultimately the wisteria itself on the bigger area of the petal has 2 darker zones, and when you pick up your paint, the idea here is to pick up a little bit more color and pigment in those darker areas straight away, and then you're using your water to disperse that color and make it lighter in the areas that you need it lighter. So again, I've picked up the color and I'm placing it as a very dark value straight away, and then with a little bit of water and a clean brush, I'm coming in and I'm dragging the color and the pigment across where I do want it to be a little bit lighter. Now it is a process. If you do follow the outline as is and work your way down and take each petal at a time, don't panic, don't think that you need to rush this, but ultimately what you're doing is you're working a petal at a time. Now the bottom layer of that petal, as was drawn in the original little sketch at the start, it's like 2 little legs. It's got 2 little legs. Now those bits we want to paint a bit darker. So when I do come across that in this particular sketch, I will use the permanent violet a little bit darker, and then I will use the water again to thin it out and thin that color out. It's very important to work out your values within the painting and work out straight away where you're going to go in darker, and work out where you're going to use your water to disperse that color and make it lighter. Now also, as you can see, I'm actually leaving areas that are going to be white, and I'm making room for the area that has the bit of yellow in the center of each petal. So I'm picking up just the permanent violet at the moment and outlining and taking my time on each petal, going in a little bit darker, and again, leaving a little bit of negative space, a little bit of white, and using the water to my advantage to get that lighter, more subtle permanent violet. Now, as these petals fold, you've got darker areas underneath that petal where it's folded, so you're using the water to your advantage and bringing it across and lightening that area. Again, nice and strong with my values straight away with the permanent violet. Just taking my time, I'm not rushing it, and I'm letting the water carry the paint. Now, there'll be times where you feel that the brush isn't moving very well for you on the paper. My main sort of thing when this does happen is that there is not enough water on my brush, or my actual paint is not wet enough. So then what happens is you're dragging that sort of dry watercolor, and you don't want to do that unless you're doing that as some sort of effect. So again, just coming in nice and strong. Now it's quite watered. I'm working on the dry paper at the moment, but as I'm applying more color, it's dropping into a wet and wet. And again, each petal as it comes, I'm taking it and painting it individually. So that line that I've just made, I'm using the water now to drag out the colour, and it's going to give me a lighter effect. Now again, remember the bottom half of each of these petals has these two little legs that we are going to paint a little bit darker. So by applying the tip of your brush using the permanent violet right down on the bottom of that petal, you can actually make it dark straight away, and then you can use your brush to actually draw that colour up towards the main half of that petal. Now when you paint this, it won't look exactly like mine. Obviously the colours that you're using, the paper that you're using, the brush that you're using, and the heaviness of your hand, the amount of water, the pigment that you have, it will vary. But if you follow this as a guideline, you should be able to get a really nice wisteria just by following the outlines and taking each petal at a time. Now here's a nice example where I'm coming in very, very strong with my colour, and then I'm using the water, a nice clean brush, to drag out the colour, and that will give me this nice lighter value that I'm after on this particular petal. And the pressure that I'm using is very, very soft. Now moving down midway, I'm just going to continue that process, and I've sped things up just a little bit, and you can follow all the way down these full petals until they start becoming not open buds. Now just zooming in, I've got one singular petal that I want to show you. So I'm putting in this permanent violet on the left hand side of the thickest part of the petal, and on the right hand side, coming in nice and thick with my colour. And then I'm using the water to disperse that colour and soften it. And then coming in nice and dark on the lower half of that petal. To finish it off. And then proceeding back up into the other petals, and again working my way down. So the left and right hand side of your petal, you're coming in nice and dark with that permanent violet or any violet colour that you have, or a purple that you favour. And then you're just using the water again to your advantage and drawing and dragging the colour. Get to know your brush, take a practice run on some scrap piece of paper. Ideally you do want a brush that has a nice point on it, and you do want a brush that carries your watercolour so that you're not dipping in every 2 seconds. So now it's time to work on the bottom half of the wisteria. Now this area, the flowers themselves haven't come to full bloom yet, so it's just the bud of the flower, and it's a different shape but quite easy to paint. All I'm doing here is using the permanent violet again, very thickly and richly, and then using the water to drag out the right hand side of each of those buds. So I'm keeping a nice deep colour on the left hand side of each of those, and then using the water to actually just draw out the colour and make it just a little bit lighter. Now once you've conquered all of these unopened buds of the flower, we're going to progress into using the cold pink that I've got in the colour palette, and all I'm doing here is adding it into the areas of the full bloomed wisteria flowers, and I'm just dropping that colour in. The paper's still a little bit moist, so it's taking that colour really nicely, but I'm also using a bit of water to disperse the colour pigment throughout the wisteria. So it's up to you where you want to place this colour, if at all, but I'm just using it to just help with a little bit of variation and help with the values and tones of this particular painting. Now I'm taking some Van Dyke brown on the tip of my paintbrush, and I'm using this to place the Van Dyke brown on the tips of the unopened wisteria flowers. And I'm placing all that colour on the left hand side of the unopened flower buds. And then what I'll be doing is using the cold pink and merging those two colours with a little bit of water up the top. So everything is blending in. Just bringing it a little bit closer so that you can see I've got the brown, and then I'm using the pink and mixing that through. Play it by ear and work out which way you want to go with a little bit more brown or a little bit more pink, and adjust your values accordingly. Use water to disperse it and bring it into the actual flower bud itself, so it all intermingles and the colours really bleed beautifully together. With the majority of the wisteria already painted, I'm now going to come in with the yellow and just place the yellow in the open budded flowers of the wisteria. I'm just dropping in a little bit of this yellow. Probably could go a little bit lighter with the yellow as it's not that prominent, but it does work well with the purple. So just dropping that yellow in now, and then just using the water to pick up a little bit of that pigment and to water down the intensity of the yellow. And I'm just using a little bit of purple just to tone down where I've put a little bit too much yellow. And don't panic if you do put a little bit too much yellow. You can add a little bit of purple on top, use the water to wash it out a little bit, as I've done in this instance. And again, I'm working from the top downwards with the areas that I want to place just a little bit of yellow. Now I'm just coming in with a second pass now of the Van Dyke brown and a little bit of the pink, and just intensifying the areas that have been absorbed by the cold pressed paper. So when you look back at your painting, always take a look at where you think that the values aren't strong enough, and then come in and use the colours and layer them so that you get a little bit more depth. Now all I'm doing here is I'm going to play with these colours that I've got to the left of me, all the greens and the purple. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the first colour, which is just a green, and then I'm mixing it in with a little bit of yellow, a little bit of purple, and working my way up the vine itself. So again, coming in with a little bit of viridian, very, very green, blue colour, but then when I take a little bit of yellow, it will soften it and it will mingle and merge on the paper. This will give you these tones and values to your actual vine, which will make it look interesting, and it won't be one singular colour. So again, coming in with one of my greens and then a little bit of purple, and let that all bleed in through the vine itself. You'll get these really beautiful highlights. You'll get these tones and values that make your painting look very interesting by placing these colours on the paper and then adding another colour on top. So I've come in with the yellow, and then I've placed a little bit of purple through, and just using the tip of my brush, I'm just working my way through this entire vine. And then there's just areas within the wisteria itself that are going to have little bits of green coming through and showing through past the actual flowers. So I'm just popping them in. Again, using the viridian, using a little bit of yellow, and making my way up the flower this time. So I started down the bottom, and I'm just using the tip of my brush to get the best type of lines that I want for this bit of my flower. Okay, as I'm coming towards the end of the painting, we're about to do the leaves. Now, with the leaves, I'm working with the yellow as a base colour, and I'm going to use the other colours to just drop them in on top of the yellow. So the outline is there for you. All you have to do is basically colour in with the yellow, and then start dropping in some of the Van Dyke brown, start dropping in some of the viridian or the malachite green, or any other greens that you may have, perhaps blues that you like. But with that yellow underbase, it's going to turn all those greens into a nice limey kind of color, but it's also going to create these beautiful patterns within your leaves, and that's what you want to see. You want to see it all dispersing and playing within each leaf. You don't want your leaf to be bland and boring. You want it to have a little bit of volume, a little bit of oomph, and to create that you need to drop in a few colors. And because your paper is wet, so you're working on a wet on wet type of style, the colors will bleed and merge together. Now in the outline itself, there isn't a leaf on the left hand side, so I'm ad-libbing with this bit. So all I'm doing here is, again, a yellow leaf with a little bit of green. Now everything is drooping downwards, so when you do add additional leaves to this painting, as you can see, I'm adding that leaf, but it's actually not drooping downwards. So what I want to do is I want to extend it a little bit. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just make a tip and extend that leaf so that it's drooping and matching the rest of the painting. Again, popping in another leaf and just making sure that tip droops down. Again, yellows, greens, browns, blues, whatever colors you have that you'd like to play with and merge together within your painting is a great option. Now to finish this off, all I am doing now is I'm assessing the painting, and I'm taking the indigo blue that I have got and I'm merging that with the purple that is on the paper. So what's happened is, as I've been painting, my actual paint has dried and it's gotten a little bit lighter, so now I can assess and work out where I want some darker values. So I'm still using the same colors, but the indigo is merging with the purple really nicely, and it's allowing me to deepen the values of my colors within this wisteria flower. Now as you progress and paint along, you may have a bit of paint that has sort of puddled or you're not happy with. Use paper towel to pick that up if you're not happy with it. Take some water and add that water to your paint to thin it out a little bit if you've gone a little bit too dark. Again, always step back, go make yourself a cup of coffee and come back and assess a dry painting and see where you can add more color and tones and values within your painting. It's sometimes a good idea to step up and stand up. Often when I'm doing these tutorials for you guys, I will be standing up and looking over my painting, which gives me a little bit more of a balanced view of what I'm painting, rather than just seeing it from a sitting down perspective. So sometimes standing up is a good idea. It's also really good for your shoulders and back to give them a stretch, because when you are painting for many hours, as I do, some days I might be painting 10 hours plus, and often I do not budge out of my chair. So from a fitness perspective, not very good. And again, you need to stretch those muscles. You need to move a little bit. So the extent of my movement may be coffee making, but at least it is movement. So it's a good thing. So just stepping back now, and I'm taking a bit of water and I'm diluting the yellow in with the purple and just letting those colors merge. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for watching, and I'd also like you to consider perhaps donating to my PayPal for more content in 2020. These videos do take some time to make, and any donation would be appreciated. The outline for this particular tutorial can be found in the Let It Run watercolor group. Please join, and thank you.